All right, so I'm looking at KO, which is Coca-Cola. I've noticed that there is a huge cluster of daily Gann cycles. 91 is close to 90 trading days, 30 trading days, 365 calendar days, just over 90 calendar days, and 287 is 1 day shy of 288, which is, 2 times 144. And as you know, 144 is a big Gann cycle, so therefore 288 is also quite important. 420 is also a Gann cycle. 210, 2 times 210 is 420. So these are all Gann cycles. So when you get a cluster of Gann cycles, you should look for a change in trend. And if you rally into that cycle, chances are you're going to sell off thereafter. And I would look for a possible low in February in sync with the 2 year anniversary of the February uh, 2020 high. That is one cycle. It doesn't have to bottom then, but I think that would be one to watch. Does it have to bottom at 48.20? I don't necessarily believe it has to bottom. It could go lower. We don't know. The way to treat the Gann cycles and the Gann lines, these horizontal lines here are 1/8 divisions of the range. The high, the low, divide by 8. Half of it would be what we call a 50% retracement at 48.20. That's the magnet. Gann said that the 50% mark is the one you want to watch. That's, market, if it's selling off, it should at least go down here. Maybe it goes lower, but, we'll watch to see what happens when it gets down here. And if it happens to be, I don't know, February 20th or 21st, and, we're completing that 2 year anniversary of high, and you're bouncing off this line, well, maybe that's a low. But if it takes it out, and, it happens to be January, and maybe you're taking out this line, maybe you got further downside to go. So I'm just letting you know, if this rally is over and you're starting a correction, then, where are you going to go? Well, at the very least, you'll go down to 48.20, and you may go down a lot further. Now, if you look at the weekly chart, you can see from the high of February 2020, count 90 weeks. It says bars here, that's 90 weeks. So 90 weeks into lower high, but you can also look at the 45-week cycle that gave you a high here. So obviously there's a 45-week cycle that works. And again said, if you're looking at cycles, you can use the same cycle on multiple time frames. So a 45-day cycle, you should also look at a 45-week cycle, 45-month cycle, etc., even a 45-year cycle. So these are the things you look at, and what's also interesting is a 144-week cycle from this low. Okay, so it's not exactly the same time, but it's in the ballpark. So maybe if we rally back for a week, we're kind of forming a top. The thing that you have to keep in mind is that markets don't necessarily top just because one cycle came due. It's usually because a cluster of cycles came due, both on the daily, weekly, and monthly cycles. You look at multiple time frames. So, as I just pointed out, you had a cluster of daily cycles that gave us a high. You had, at the same time, a cluster of weekly cycles, 45 and 90, that gave you a high. So 45 weeks from this high, 90 weeks from this high. Those are things you pay attention to. And if it doesn't break down in the next week or so, then we'll say, oh, okay, maybe this maybe it's waiting for this 144-week cycle. So that's the way to look at it. Now, the other thing you can do here, which is kind of interesting, you can say, oh, okay, well, what if we started our count from the low, the March low, end of March low? Oh, look at that. Voila. We've lined up with a low. Does that mean this will be a low here in mid-December? It could be. We don't know. I kind of doubt it. I don't think the selling's going to be over by mid-December, but who knows? If this is a total waterfall decline, if you just get totally crushed, well, maybe this will be some sort of a low here in mid-December. Because you had a low here. In theory, this could also be a low, just as going back, you saw here. Let me see if I can get it. Yeah, can't get it. There we go. All right, so if we start from the high, you notice 45 weeks gave us a high, another high. So if you start from the low and it gave you a low, maybe it gives you another low. It's possible. But I would only say here that you should keep an open mind, because I kind of doubt that it's going to bottom in mid-December unless you get a totally catastrophic sell-off into mid-December. If that happens, then yeah, maybe it's a low. And you'll know that because you'll be looking at momentum indicators, and they'll tell you whether it's overbought or oversold. And obviously, if you get a whacking move down here in the next few weeks, your momentum indicators, oscillators, etc., will be well oversold. So that's the way to look at that. These are just a couple of ideas that you can use when you're looking at stocks. It doesn't just apply to Coca-Cola, obviously. You could apply this to, these Gann cycles work on everything: stocks, bonds, forex, commodities, even crypto. So play around with it. All you have to do is count the number of weeks from any low and any high and see what you come up with. If it's a stock you're interested, you're probably going to have more, you're going to be more keen to follow it closely. So why not, count those Gann cycles? And what are the Gann cycles? Well, some of the more obvious ones are like, 30, 45, 60, 90, 72, 144, 288. You could probably pick up a book on Gann and, get a complete list of Gann cycles. But, those are just a couple to start with, and just start playing around. Look at daily counts, both daily trading day, calendar day, and also look at weekly, monthly, and even yearly counts. So every high and low, you count forward Gann cycles, and where you get a cluster, as we just showed you, right here, you got a huge cluster. You have a higher probability that it's going to be a change in trend. So if you rally into it, you'll probably sell off. Does it work every time? No, it doesn't work every time. We're talking about a probability, not a certainty. And I think where people come into trouble is that they expect too much from the cycles. They want them to be perfect. Well, they're not going to be perfect. There's plenty of cycles that don't work. The market is strong. It just keeps going higher. And you probably, if you're looking to sell a stock like this, and you have to trade with a stop loss because you don't know, something could happen and it go whipping to new highs. I don't think that's going to happen, but hey, I've been surprised before. You can have the perfect setup for Gann and still the market goes the other way. That happens. Yet deal with it. Just take your lumps and go on to the next trade. Because you're dealing with probabilities. Therefore, you take 10 trades, and 6 out of the 10 turn out to be winners, and you have good, a stop loss on every trade. Your trades will be, your losses will be low, and you let your winners run. It should probably work out for you. The other reason that I'm interested in this whole thing is because, if you do any research on YouTube, just type in the word sugar, and there's all kinds of evidence building over the last 10, 20 years that, sugar is a major factor in causing diabetes and all kinds of health problems, chronic disease. And what I find interesting is that, if if the government was really serious about dealing with COVID, you should try to make sure that people are healthy before they get hit with COVID. If they've got diabetes and kidney disease and other things, they're not going to do very well on COVID. So I think it's really funny that they do nothing about sugar. I mean, at the very least, they should probably tax it like they do tobacco. Now, a lot of these YouTube videos, that's exactly what they suggest. And yet, the sugar industry has a lot of power and they're able to fight off that sort of thing. But I wonder, a lot of people were suggesting we're now at the same place we were with tobacco in the 1960s when, the Surgeon General came out and said, hey, tobacco causes cancer. They put a label on every pack of cigarettes. And they're looking to do that with sugar, Well, if you want to buy a Coca-Cola, they'll put a Surgeon General warning on there that, this could lead to obesity and may cause, diabetes, etc. If that were to really happen, then I think you'd know we're crossing a threshold. And the sugar water industry, Pepsi and Coca-Cola would be in deep trouble. For the same reasons that tobacco, as soon as they started taxing tobacco like crazy, 40, 50, 60% of the cost of the pack of cigarettes is taxed. Maybe it's more in some places. So if that were to happen with a can of Coke or Pepsi, wow. Can you imagine? Can you imagine paying $20 for a six-pack of Coca-Cola? I'll bet you, call me crazy, but I'll bet you people would drink less Coca-Cola. So I think the risk is that we're reaching that threshold where, maybe government will say, hey, we got to raise taxes. Why don't we tax the things that are costing society a lot of money? Tobacco, we already did that. Sugar seems like an obvious choice. Now, you can argue that, hey, you shouldn't single out, the soda industry. You should go after sugar at its core. But, I think that's logical. Maybe they should. But the sugar industry, the sugar lobby is quite strong. So who knows? Maybe it won't happen. But all I'm saying, I'm not an expert on this industry, a sugar industry, but I am suggesting that I find it very interesting that there are more and more doctors and researchers coming out and presenting their case against sugar. And you've seen all the books. There's tons of books on this now. And I wonder if maybe we're reaching that threshold. That's what caused me to focus on the Gann cycles, thinking, well, is it possible that some action will be taken to tax the sugar water industry? And if so, does that line up with the Gann cycles? So that's the part I find very interesting because, this is the 45-week cycle is a killer. 45 weeks from high to lower high, 45 weeks from high to high. Every 45 weeks you get a high. So if we get crushed and then maybe we rally back, then maybe September of 2022 is some sort of lower high here, and then you just keep going down until, this thing is like, the tobacco industry where it doesn't go away. They can probably still sell plenty of sugar water in other countries, but the more you tax sugar, if they finally start doing that, it's a threshold change in society. And granted, some politicians like Bloomberg tried to do that in New York City, and it tried to limit the size of, not even tax it, just limit the size of a container of Coca-Cola, and that didn't go down too well. But maybe we're closer now to the point where, a politician can get away with taxing sugar, or at least putting some sort of warning on every can of Coca-Cola. If they did that, wow, I think that alone might have a huge negative effect on the stock. Will it happen? Who knows? I could be totally wrong, but I'm just saying from a Gann perspective, this looks pretty ominous. 90 weeks down from high, 45 weeks from high. And sure enough, we've seen 1 week after that, it started to sell off. Now, maybe you try to rally back and then, in sync with the 144-week cycle, you just totally get crushed. That could happen. So I'm interested to see what happens. I find this very fascinating because, what I find is that you get these inflection points in the market, and it's also true for a particular stock. They have their own rhythm, and they obey certain cycles. And clearly with Coca-Cola, the 45-week cycle is quite important. So let's see what happens. This is going to be fun to watch. I just want to give you something to chew on for the next few weeks, and you can watch this and see if it doesn't sell off. Remember, the first downside target is 48.20. It doesn't mean it'll stop there. It might continue below that, but the 50% retracement is always, one of the most important support levels to watch in any correction. So half of the swing is the 50% retracement, and 48.20 is the level that you want to watch on the way down. And you can make up your mind whether it's going to go further based on how it behaves when it gets down to this level. So it's all going to be interesting. You're looking at Gann cycles at work and Gann divisions at work. Again, these are 1/8 divisions. Each line here is 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, 8/8. So you're just dividing the range into 8 equal segments, and you're looking at the midway point as being the most important division. So I hope this has been helpful, and my name is James Smith. My website is www.gannanalysis.net. I hope this has stimulated your interest in Gann, and good luck in your trading.